Good morning. I'm Janie Parrish with the Wadsworth Area Chamber of Commerce. And boy, everybody's in for a treat today because we're going to learn about the Medina County Historical Society. And with us today is Brian Feron, who works not only, well, it's probably a volunteer position.
It is.
I was trying to get you a little money, Brian. But Brian's a longtime friend of mine, and I was so happy that the Historical Society of Medina County joined the Wadsworth Chamber, but he also volunteers for the City of Medina Historical Society. So welcome, Brian.
Well, thank you, Janie. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I know it's always going to be a fun time.
That's right.
Appreciate you having me.
Well, let's start out with the Medina County Historical Society. Now, I have to tell you, I really didn't understand, because you're located in Medina, that there was a Medina County Historical Society in the city of Medina. So tell us about that, please.
Well, the County Historical Society is 103 years old. It was started in 1922, and there had been several attempts prior to that to form up historical groups or organizations to preserve parts of history, but they kind of fell apart. But by 1922, Blake McDowell, who happened to be one of our prominent citizens at the time, along with several others, really pushed to get it chartered and incorporated, and did so. And thereby started a whole new chapter in containing our history and archives, letters, photos, and so forth. We are the County Historical Society, where they were the first, and I believe we're still the largest, but the point is it represents areas of our county that typically didn't have any kind of museums up until more recent times. And so we do have an eclectic collection in our two house museums that we value very much. And many of the items we do have go back to the earliest days of the county, and we also have some contemporary items too. So we really try to emphasize that history never really stops. While there isn't a true Medina Historical Society, they do have their town hall and engine house museum on a square, which is really reflective of the city's core business district. And so we do coordinate our activities with them, and we help them, they help us promote when we have events and so forth. So we all work together, as well as we do work with many of the other county and township museums as well, because most are volunteer organizations, as ours, and they have the need to get the word out. They like to share their vision and what they collect around the county, or what they have collected that reflect their area. I mean, Litchfield is different from Granger. Granger is different from Valley City. Valley City is different from Lodi. And so it goes. And so we have Wadsworth, Brunswick, Medina as our three key cities, but the county encompasses 186,000 people, and we have history from all walks of life.
Holy tamale. I love this. That is, excuse me, very cool. So in Medina, you have the John Smart House, and so that is a city.
Well, that's actually county. It is actually a county, but it's our main museum, our oldest one. The short story is we had the Munson House was our very first museum. Up until 1958, our items were stored in boarding houses, some members' homes, sometimes in the library. They were scattered all over. When Cora Munson passed away at age 99, she willed her house and contents to the society. And that house became our first official museum.
Okay.
And then in 1984, that house had to be moved off the Washington Street location to make room for courthouse expansion. And so the county said, if you move that out of the way, we'll give you the John Smart House in trade. So that's how we acquired a bigger home at the John Smart House, which is a lovely Victorian home. And that was our main house and museum and research center right up until 2019. And we were approached by the Phillips family to purchase the iconic McDowell Phillips house. And that house was a true icon in our city.
Yes.
It contains so many records, thousands of documents relating back to the family of 5 generations that had lived there, and they kept everything. including many of the important papers of Harrison Gray Blake, one of our city's main founders. He was not only the mayor, he was the abolitionist, he was a lawyer, he was a businessman. He served in our state Senate and our state House as a representative before going on to the U.S. Congress during Lincoln's term. So the documents are just incredible, and we invite people to visit the House to learn. We were a very important part of the local, state, and national political scenes throughout the 1800s, and especially during the Civil War and post-Civil War activity, when Medina County really started to come alive through the Industrial Revolution, advent of the railroads, industry. But we were primarily agriculture-based economy in our county. We didn't have real heavy industry like Lorain or Cuyahoga, but we did have a very strong agricultural community. And that's what you see in some of the feed mills that are still in existence. And, once the interurban rail cars were available and the trains, farmers were able to get their products to market. And in turn, people started buying items from Cleveland, New York City that could be transported here more affordably. So we've seen a lot of growth in the county.
Holy smokes, you're like a fountain of wisdom about Medina County history.
Well,
Yes.
it is interesting, and it's fun to help people understand. We weren't always this bedroom community, and when you look at Brunswick, Wadsworth, and Medina, a bulk of our citizens work outside of the area but come home, and they come home for a reason. They like the rural atmosphere or semi-rural atmosphere. They like the community projects and entertainment venues, or just simply the easy commute to Akron, Cleveland, Worcester. We have people that really reside here as their main homestead, but they quite likely may work outside the county. I think at one time about 50% of our population worked outside the county. And but we try to show people the history and why this area was so important in the Western Reserve, following the very early days of the Connecticut Land Company.
Because Medina County is the heart of Western
You
Reserve.
got it.
Yeah.
The heart of the Western Reserve.
Yes, we were just talking about that with that's on the license plates. You can get a license plate with that on.
You sure can.
Yeah.
You just go to the BMV, and on the organizational plates that you can select, you look for Medina County Historical Societies, plural,
Okay.
and it'll bring up the template, and you can put a custom plate or use a random plate, but it will have the tagline, Heart of the Western Reserve, which I think is so true of the pioneer spirit that it took to get to this point and the way our county has grown. Our big setback was the Civil War, where we lost so many men. It took 30 years to recoup the male population after the Civil War. So the women had to carry the ball quite a bit following the Civil War, and we have very strong women-owned businesses in the county. And even as far back as the turn of the century, I'm amazed at how many people discover that women owned a lot of the hardware stores, shops, hat boutiques. I mean, they had women-related businesses, but they also had automobiles. They were politically active. They were big proponents of the library system, not just here in Wadsworth, but also throughout the county. So I just admire, although they may not have had the right to vote, they certainly had a role in the community. Kind of a lot of strong-willed people such as yourself that got things done.
Oh, good. Because I was going to say, but they just couldn't vote.
They couldn't.
Yeah.
But we were
that
fortunate
changed.
that changed, and some of our leading citizens of the day often were behind the movement. And I think that I'm amazed when we look at a recent addition to our museum property was the World War II War Bond building. It sat on Medina Square during from 1942 to 45, and it was the women of the community that were out there selling war bonds all the time. The men were off to fight, or the older men were taking the place of the younger men, so women were left with that major responsibility to make sure people brought their cash or their savings. They converted to a war bond, and that supported the war effort. They championed victory gardens. Everybody had a victory garden at your house if you were able. You raised your own vegetables, you canned, and that freed up food products for the troops. So everybody sacrificed, but it was the women leading the home sacrifice, which I found pretty cool, and it's probably not told enough.
Okay, I like that. I'm glad you're telling it now. Holy.
I think it's our role to do that. It really is.
Sure. Now tell me about your partnership with the Wadsworth Historical Society.
Well, Roger Havens, who's the president of that society, and I are good friends. We work together on projects. In fact, the last project we worked on was our brand new book. This is on the Revolutionary War soldiers that are buried in Medina County. And there's 3 or 4 from Wadsworth. And in fact, the book was published in Wadsworth.
Oh,
so
nice.
Call out to your printer. I think it was a Star Printing Company. Yeah, the 5-Star Printing Company, excuse me.
There you go.
And he did a wonderful job putting that booklet together. It took 10 months of research with a volunteer committee to access the data records on the soldiers, verify their census records, verify their pension records, and then, of course, looking at the gravestones around the townships in the county. And they were scattered pretty much throughout the county. And we wrote a story about them. We put it in more of a narrative form, so it wasn't just, he did this, then that, then, we tried to get the military records in there, but also tell a little bit about who the person was. And that turned out very, very well. We were very proud of that book. It'll be distributed to the school system here shortly. And we have PDF versions available, too, for the students to access. But it's a nice reference book. It was our America 250 project we obtained through a state grant from the Ohio 250 Commission. Commissioner Steve Hambley helped get that ball rolling with us. He came to me and said, how about this project? And we worked together to get the grant requests approved, and it was enough to pay for the printing of the books. But the rest of it was all done by volunteer labor. So again, you call on people to do things, it's amazing the response you get.
And that's true, and a lot of times you just have to ask.
You're absolutely right.
Yep.
We have genealogists, we have historians, we have people that have family members that are still here in this area, and the ancestors were buried, and they were kind of surprised to think, oh my gosh, we didn't realize that great-great-grandfather served in the Revolution. And while you may not have held a weapon, there were also patriots that managed wagons and foodstuffs and animals and things like that, that everyone must have had a role in it back then. Our population wasn't that great, and I'm sure by the time they got to Ohio and Medina County, most of the soldiers were up in years, and so they came with either their children or their siblings and eventually settled. Ironically, out in York Township, there's a Stone Road and a Branch Road where there were 2 soldiers, Mr. Branch and Mr. Stone, that happened to settle right in that area. You got to wonder, okay, you got there first, you named the road, I guess. So one of the benefits of being first.
There you go.
But it was just kind of a lot of coincidences like that we discovered. And Wadsworth has a great museum right near downtown. They're working on acquiring the St. Mark's Church. I saw the big banner in front when I drove in, and I noticed your community magazine called it out. I know Roger's been working on that for some time, and it's a wonderful building. I'm a little jealous that we're trying to build a Medina County History Center behind the McDowell Phillips House because we're out of space, and we want a multi-purpose building that kind of resembles the barn we had to take down. But he's got a turnkey solution right there with a beautiful church, parking lot, community center, and I hope the community responds. And I think if you're watching, please support the Wadsworth Historical Society on their venture. I think that's a wonderful addition to your town. It will preserve a very important landmark. I believe it is the second oldest church in the county. The oldest is in Weymouth, right in my backyard. Oh. And they look remarkably alike. So I guess they used the same builder and architect back then. But it's the county historical societies combined, whether you're in the township or our main ones in Medina, we rely on volunteer donations. And even a small check every now and then makes a difference. It helps us keep the utility bills. We own both our properties outright, which is a blessing at times.
Sure.
And it's also more expense to maintain. I think Roger has it good with the city owning the museum building, and they take care of some of the expenses, and that's wonderful. But we're not in that same situation. So when we own two properties, that's two old houses that require maintenance and
Yes.
support and utilities, and just to run historical societies anymore. The computer licenses programs, the insurance requirements, and supplies like any business, it adds up.
Now, one thing that I did want to ask you about was currently in Medina and at the McDowell Phillips house is a wedding dress display. So tell us about that, because I think that is so intriguing.
It has been a great exhibit. I don't believe we've ever done such a large exhibit. We had so many wedding gowns in the collection. Fortunately, they were well preserved in the John Smart House attic. It is a climate-controlled attic, and we do use proper museum storage containers to house. But some of these dresses go back to the 1810, 1830s,
Holy smokes.
1840s, and we have about 25 on display right now at the McDowell Phillips house. Now, that exhibit is closing Sunday the 17th, coming right
Okay.
up. Now, we will probably allow other tours by appointment until everything's put away. It'll take a while to get everything put away. It took them 3 months to get everything set up. A lot of the dresses required maybe some help, stitching and reinforcing, and some were so thin we couldn't get them on mannequins. So, you had to present the dress the best way you can, whether that's hanging or laid across a piece of furniture. But people have been really intrigued by this exhibit.
Sure.
They had no
Yeah.
idea that white wedding gowns really didn't come across the area until 1900 or so. Up to that point, most gowns were different colors, some very vibrant blues, burgundies, beautiful gowns. Even the men walking through are kind of like, who's going to come through and watch this?
Yeah.
They said, wow, this is pretty impressive. They see corsets women had to wear, the wire hoop skirts they had to wear, some of the men's clothing. Although we didn't have as many men's outfits simply because they either wore them out or they buried them in it. I don't know which.
They went somewhere.
They went somewhere, but we did try to explain some of the other wedding customs of the day. And we even have a portrait of the famous Seville giants, which you may have heard of, Captain Bates and his wife Anna Swan Bates, who were circus giants that toured the world. And they're buried in Seville, where they ended up retiring. But Queen Victoria allegedly paid for her gown. Now, this woman was 7 feet 10 inches tall.
Wow.
Imagine the fabric required on a gown like that, and it's beautiful. And we have a photo of where they were married at a chapel in London, and it was alleged that she sent them a wedding gift too. So people are just astounded that
She probably sent them a blender or something.
yeah, maybe something, a bowl set or who knows, probably. But we've really enjoyed the exhibit. It has taken a great deal of work, and it's a little more difficult to manage, museum flows, but people have been very patient. We had a special booklet created, so it takes you on a step-by-step to each stop along the way, and it described the dress, or if we know who wore it and what it's made of, what year it was worn. So people really felt they got some real value. We did have to charge admission because the exhibit
Sure.
did cost a considerable amount of money to put on, but we were fortunate that nobody disputed the price. They said this was well worth it. They got to see the beautiful house too, because half the guests had never been in the house. We have tour groups. Most of our tour groups, in fact, one last week, I don't think there was one Medina County resident. They were all from Cleveland, Parma, Far East Side, but they'd heard about this house and this exhibit, as you have, and they were excited to see it. So I think we did a good job. We kind of copied a little bit from Summit County a couple of years ago. They did a nice wedding gown exhibit in the Simon Perkins mansion. But I think ours was a little bit more intimate because we had so much of the furniture in the house we could use. So people really seemed to understand this type of gown would have been worn in a house like this.
Okay.
And the upstairs, we did have a few more modern gowns up until the 1980s, I believe. But you could track through decades from the 1800s, the turn of the century. Our flapper gowns were they looked like party dresses. You would not have guessed these were wedding gowns, but they were very cool. And people really liked that. Then into the 40s, the World War II weddings were hurry-up weddings in most cases, so some of the brides commented that they didn't have much time to make up their minds, and you took what you could find. And
in husbands as well.
yes, the husband was being called up. You didn't fool around. Well, maybe he's not the right guy. No, you took your chance and you rolled the dice and you went with it. Exactly. So we enjoyed telling those kind of stories to people, and there were some rather sadder tales too that we share, but we don't dwell on them. We just say, poor Bessie McDowell, their oldest child, dated a Navy ensign for many years, 4.5 years before they got permission to marry. They did so in Medina at the family home, and returned back east. Well, he was gone 6 weeks later of typhus. So poor Bessie returned home heartbroken, but she was pregnant, and she went on to have the daughter Florence, who married O.B. Phillips, and that's how the Phillips name became associated with the property. And the house was handed down actually through the Phillips side. But people hear that story and they go, oh my gosh. And I said, well, life isn't always rosy. People had a lot to overcome in our history, and the hardships of losing a spouse or a child was just as harsh back then as it is today. And that's why we also coordinate some of our programs with the Spirit Walk, which is coming up in September, Spirits of the Past. Mm-hmm. We cooperate that project with the Showbiz Company and Medina County Arts Council. And, it's a walk around the square with 6 stops of historic issues that people learn or we talk about. And we also work with the Spring Grove Cemetery. They have an amazing cemetery, and now they have the Underground Railroad designation due to H.G. Blake's activities, and Herman Canfield and his wife, who actually, he died in the Civil War. She went on to start a school for the freed slave children, and also returned to the battlefront to take care of soldiers even after her husband was killed. So you have these incredible stories to tell, and people are just like, really? I go, yeah. I said, this is how we got to where we are today, and it took a lot of hard work. And I think historical societies are so important to telling the story of the past, but also laying the groundwork, what's current in our generation.
Right.
We have our first computer still in our storage, and someday we'll be out on display, and it's only this big.
Yeah. And then there's Taylor Swift.
That's right.
There you go. Well, Brian, I wanted to ask for people, how do you find the historical societies in different communities?
Okay.
Yeah.
Most have websites.
Okay.
You can, if you check our website, it's simply MedinaCountyHistoricalSociety.com. We also have a Facebook page. Some of the smaller societies may not be on Facebook, but they may be linked to others. Just drive around. Every spring there's the Dandelion Tour, which is a feature driving tour that takes a quadrant of the county, and it will help you visit maybe 4 or 5 museums that day, because we do have 17 of them, so it's kind of hard to get to everything in one day.
Sure.
So we divide up the county in quadrants every year and pick a different one, and that's a great way to see. Some museums are relatively small, and you can get through pretty quick, but there's a lot of them that are just jam full. I think the Wadsworth Museum, you could easily spend several hours going through that. There's an incredible collection there. And in fact, one of our major exhibits we're planning next year at the John Smart House will be the history of medicine in Medina County. Oh. And we want to kind of develop a timeline of everything from, Lodi was the first hospital. Medina didn't get a hospital till 1942. And of course, Wadsworth. And then all the doctors, midwives, nurses, and try to come up with a timeline of significant events. Of course, we had the Spanish flu, we had polio, we had many different major diseases along the way, as well as the advent of X-ray, surgical practices, safety in cars, which helped reduce injuries. So we have one of our board members is Dr. Lynn Mass, who's long retired ophthalmologist, but he's very keen on helping us develop dialogues and interviews with some of the old, what he calls the old docs club that gets together once a month, and that's what they call themselves. So they are a wealth of information to discuss medicine from the earliest days to current. And so we hope that that's going to be a nice exhibit to show people, and we'll do some YouTubes on that as well with some oral interviews. So it's going to be exciting, and of course Roger's got the doctor's office. So I said, "Come on,
does.
Roger." I said, "You've got a lot of stuff over here." I said, "Maybe you'll consider loaning us a few pieces." And he said, "Sure."
Yeah.
So I think, but that would be a nice tie-in. We've never really focused on medicine too much, and we have a very sinister-looking operating table at the John Smart House, all glass bottom and everything. It's pretty. You don't think you'd want to lay with nothing but a gown on, if that, on that thing. It would be mighty cold, I think. But anyway,
oh my gosh.
It's really interesting to realize how medicine has evolved. You know, when I was a kid, the emergency room at Medina Hospital, you had to ring the doorbell to get into the emergency room.
That's
and it was
true.
around the back side of the hospital.
Yeah.
And that's how I got in there and sewed up after I put my hand through a glass door, which wasn't very smart, but anyway.
I have one more question to
Sure.
ask you. I remember reading where at the McDowell Phillips house, you found an invitation to Abe Lincoln's inauguration.
We did. This has to be the find of my lifetime. When we had just purchased the property, and there were two barns on the property, and one was, it didn't even have an inside access. You could only get through the outside door. And we opened this door, and it was filled with furniture right to the edge of the doorway. So the only thing we could do was start pulling things out. And so we took long benches, dressers, beds, trunks, and in one of the dresser drawers, there was still clothing in these drawers. And we pick up the clothing, and there's this large envelope addressed to H.G. Blake on Pennsylvania Avenue, which would have made sense. He was in Congress at the time. And we open it, and it's an invitation to Abraham Lincoln's Union Ball, which was the inaugural. It was held in March of that year, but simply because of the weather, I suppose. Anyway, we go, holy cow, this thing is, here it was in the barn, slightly mouse-eaten, but very legible. And it reads, had all the dignitaries who was being invited to this inauguration. And it was just an incredible find. We also have William McKinley's invitation to his inaugural, which unfortunately Robert McDowell had passed away earlier that year, and he was nominated for the U.S. Senate and probably would have won due to the influence his family had. But Mrs. McDowell, we believe, went to the inauguration. And this thing has a great page by page of what the event was going to be, very fancy. In fact, our cookbook we put together has Philadelphia-style terrapin soup, which was the main course, which I guess it was all the rage back in 1897. So anyway, much more political memorabilia than we ever imagined was in this house. And we've had banners. We have a Garfield and a new banner we're just uncovering and having restored. We have the Lincoln banner from 1860 parade, which was an incredible banner that we had restored. And it's just, I'm just so pleased his family kept everything. We'd probably yell at them for being hoarders nowadays. But thank God they did, because they've given us a treasure trove of history right under our nose. And we're still working our way through the big attic of that house, believe it or not.
Oh my gosh. Well, Brian Feron from the Historical Society of the Medina County, as well as, can I say City of Medina?
Well, we certainly can't. We're right in the heart of Medina, so we have much of our items is Medina-centric, absolutely.
Okay.
But we do consider, our name is the County Historical Society,
Okay.
so we would invite all of you to come visit us. You can check our website for open days. During the holidays, we'll have special hours, and we are always available for special tours if people call. We'd like to do maybe 5 or more people, but we can open the houses pretty quick. If somebody really wants to be in town with some guests and wants to come see us, we'll try and accommodate those requests.
Okay. Well, Brian, thank you for all you're doing. This is absolutely wonderful.
Well, I'm pleased to do it, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell our story a little bit.
Oh, and no charge.
No charge. Oh, wow, that's even better. I didn't have to buy you lunch.
Nothing. Oh, Brian Feron, thank you so much. That I could listen to you all day and into the next day.
Oh, well, don't tell my wife that, because that just encourages him. So she says, no, she's been a huge supporter, and she
Sure.
really does help me a great deal. And she, not being from Medina originally or the county, she grew up in Independence. She has now learned a great deal more than she ever imagined she would, keeping a nice quiet lifestyle before she got married. And,
and
now she's embroiled in everything in our county history. So
That's very nice. So thank you, Brian.
my pleasure. Thank you for having us.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.